In a viral clip with Patrick Bet David, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seemed to make a historic declaration recognizing the Armenian genocide. Here's that clip.
Why haven't you yet recognized the Armenian, Assyrian, and the Greek genocide that the Turkish did to that community?
In fact, I think we have, because I think the Knesset passed a resolution to that effect.
I don't know if it's come from you, though. I don't know if it's come from the Prime Minister of Israel.
Yeah, I just did.
Okay.
Here you go.
All right. Well, thank you for doing that.
Journalist Nicole Jansezian joins us now from Jerusalem. So, Nicole, was that official?
Well, Raj, it depends, I guess, who you're asking or what you're listening to. I'm going to tell you about how I came into the news, because I was actually in the U.S. I was in New York, and suddenly my phone started blowing up with headlines in Hebrew because I would track the Israeli news, and I see this from Channel 11. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a first, has recognized the Armenian genocide. And I dropped the phone, and I told my husband, I'm like, Netanyahu recognized the genocide. Like, where did this come from? And so, of course, the next thing was like, you read the article, but then I had to watch the clip myself, to see what actually was said and how this came about. Because as a journalist, I am following the news, and also being part of the Armenian community here in Jerusalem. This would be on the forefront of my radar if this was even being spoken about in the Knesset. But it is far from the agenda, as you can imagine. This has been far from the agenda of the Israeli government for the past 2 years. And so it came as such a shock. So I had to go to the clip itself. And I had my suspicions of what I thought, but I wanted to, do due diligence and speak to some Armenians from, in the community here in Jerusalem and in Israel, and also Israelis themselves, and find out what they thought. And the first word that I encountered when I said, "Oh, so what did you think of Netanyahu's recognition of the genocide?" And the guy said, "Baloney." I was like, oh, wow. So it turned out, as I was interviewing people, that is generally maybe they don't use the same word, but it was generally the assessment was that this was not only not official enough, that it wasn't official at all. And since then, nothing's been done about it. So
the one time that you and I actually have met, it was in the Armenian quarter. Obviously, you're married to an Armenian. This is a very intimately deep thing for you and your community and your family. If you walk around the Armenian quarter in Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, they have these signs, basically pleading with people to recognize the Armenian genocide. Here's the question. Now, obviously, I kind of know the answer, but so it's a little rhetorical, but why is there such a hesitation amongst the Israeli government to recognize such an obvious atrocity?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think a lot of people just aren't aware of the geopolitical complications here, and why a country that was built from the ashes of a genocide, the Holocaust, why this country would not be one to recognize the first genocide of the 20th century, the Armenian genocide. And for people who aren't aware, because it's not widely taught in America either. And it's not even, I can talk about, it's not taught in Israel, that's for sure. But, 1.5 million Armenians were killed during the era of Ottoman Turkey in Turkey, and what is Western Turkey or Eastern Turkey. And they were killed by the Ottoman Turks, and the Kurds were involved as well. Anyway, it was really a horrific genocide. And then many of them fled. The ones who survived, some of them ended up in Jerusalem, and also Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. And that's why you have this community here. But Israel has good ties with Turkey, has had good ties with Turkey. And now, it's not the same government or country that committed the acts, but the new Turkish government has also been denying that this accounts for a genocide, what happened. And so Israel has also gone with the official Turkish policy of not recognize it. Now, leaders have said that these are atrocities, and this was the Armenian tragedy, but they fall short of calling it a genocide itself.
Well, I think that goes along the lines of you don't really understand it until you're in the land. When the whole Ukraine-Russia war started, everyone was on the side of Ukraine, but Israel was kind of slow walking that. Even going so far as to have Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett visit Putin. People are like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Well, if you haven't been on the border with Syria, which I have been, and heard Russian bombs that seem like they're 2 feet away, you don't realize that Russia is on the border, or at least it was at the time, with Israel." Or another one that I find kind of frustrating is why is Israel arming or helping arm Azerbaijan when obviously there's a conflict with Armenia, which is a Christian community. But then you realize, well, that Israel has access to Iran, their chief enemy, through this neighboring country, Azerbaijan. It's very complicated, and obviously Turkey is a huge player. And up until recently, there seemed to be somewhat good ties. Obviously, those ties are definitely cooling down under Erdogan, and so it's all this unbelievable chess game. So it unless you're actually in the Middle East and you realize how complicated it is, you can't really understand the whole ball game. So I guess, Nicole, as someone who really, this is a huge part of your family's history and culture, what do you hope, and maybe in closing, what do you hope Israel does?
I think it's not for me to say what Israel should do, from a personal perspective. I will say that just watching what's happening, it's a shame that moral decisions and perhaps, a moral obligation as such is subject to politics. And even, when Netanyahu spoke with Patrick Beit David, Patrick is of Armenian and Assyrian descent. And so was Netanyahu pandering to that audience? Was he also trying to upset Turkey, which Turkey has been extremely critical of Israel, accusing Israel of a genocide in Gaza, in this recent war? So is it that he was he sticking, needling Turkey in this case? And I don't know, or was it just flippant and just say, "Oh yeah, we've recognized it, and then let's hope nobody picks it up," but it went viral. But I would hope that it would be the moral obligation of one country that suffered a genocide, was built on the backs of a genocide, would help another country also be able to close that generational door to the atrocities that happened to them, so they also could begin to heal and move on.
Well, Nicole, I appreciate your time, my friend.
Thank you so much, Raj.